Ethan's world exploded in light and chaos, his body tumbling through a vortex of energy. One moment, he had been in his workshop running final diagnostics on his prototype war drones, and the next, he was through a tunnel of shimmering blue light. His stomach twisted as gravity fluctuated wildly, and then, with a sudden jolt, he was thrown onto solid ground. He gasped, his head spinning as he pushed himself onto his hands and knees. The scent of grass and earth filled his lungs, and a warm breeze ruffled his hair. Blinking rapidly, he took in his surroundings, a vast open field of golden grass stretching into the horizon, with towering mountains in the distance and a sky unlike anything he had ever seen. Twin suns burned in the heavens, casting an eerie glow over the land. Ethan's heart pounded as he struggled to process what had just happened. One thing was clear, this wasn't Earth. He quickly checked himself for injuries. His body ached, but nothing seemed broken. His clothes were the same, his work jacket, utility pants, and gloves still covered in dust from his workshop. Then, his eyes fell on the device strapped to his left wrist. His console, usually used for controlling drones, was glowing with strange symbols and lines of unreadable text. As he reached for it, a sudden wave of static filled his ears, and then a mechanical voice spoke in his mind. War Factory System activated. User identified, Ethan Voss. Initializing combat protocols. Ethan froze, his breath hitching. What the hell? Before he could process further, a rustling in the grass caught his attention. He turned sharply, instincts kicking in. Emerging from the tall grass was a group of armored figures on horseback. They moved with purpose, their armor gleaming in the twin sunlight, weapons strapped to their sides. They looked medieval, swords, spears, and shields marked with an unfamiliar crest. At the head of the group rode a woman clad in silver and blue armor, a long crimson cape billowing behind her. Her piercing green eyes locked onto him, and she raised a hand, signaling her men to stop. "You there," she called, her voice firm and commanding. "State your name and your allegiance." Ethan hesitated, realizing how bad this looked. A lone stranger appearing out of nowhere in the middle of their territory. He raised his hand slowly, trying not to seem like a threat. "I don't know where I am," he admitted. "My name is Ethan. I just got here." The woman's eyes narrowed. "A spy from the Empire," she accused. Behind her, the knights tensed, gripping their weapons. Whoa, let's not jump to conclusions," Ethan said, taking a careful step back. His wrist console flickered red, and the voice returned. "Hostile intent detected. Deploying automated defenses." Ethan barely had time to react before twin flashes of light erupted beside him. Two sleek combat drones materialized in midair, their metallic bodies humming with energy. They hovered at his sides, scanning the approaching knights with glowing red optics. The horses reared in panic, and the knights shouted in alarm, drawing their weapons. The woman's expression shifted from suspicion to shock. "What sorcery is this?" she demanded. Ethan felt a cold sweat form on his brow. "Not sorcery. Technology," he corrected, though he doubted that would make much sense to them. The drones whirred ominously, their targeting systems locking onto the knights. "Stand down," the woman ordered her men, though her grip remained firm on her sword. She studied Ethan, her gaze flickering between him and the machines he had seemingly summoned from nowhere. "You are not of this world," she stated rather than asked. Ethan exhaled slowly, lowering his hands. "No. And I don't know how I got here." The tension hung thick in the air. The knights were clearly on edge, but they hadn't attacked yet. That was something. The woman regarded him for a long moment before she spoke again. "I am Commandant Seraphine of the Kingdom of. If you are truly not our enemy, you will come with us to speak with King Alden. He will decide your fate." Ethan wasn't thrilled about being taken prisoner, but he also didn't have a better option. His only chance at understanding this world, and this war factory system now apparently integrated into him, was to go with them. He gave a slow nod. "All right. Lead the way." With a simple command through his console, the drones powered down and vanished, dematerializing into the war factory's storage. The knights still regarded him warily, but Seraphine turned her heads and gestured for him to follow. As they rode toward the distant kingdom, Ethan's mind span with questions. Had he been sent here by accident? Or was there a reason? And most importantly, if this war factory system had granted him the ability to create weapons, what kind of battles was he about to be dragged into? Ethan rode in silence, his mind racing as he followed Commandant Seraphine and her knights toward the towering walls of. The twin suns cast long shadows as they passed through rolling hills and dense forests, the air thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. His console remained silent, but he could feel the hum of energy beneath his fingertips, a constant reminder of the strange power now embedded within him. Every so often, he caught the knights sneaking glances at him, their expressions a mix of curiosity and wariness. He didn't blame them. He was just as confused as they were. As they neared the gates, Ethan got his first real look at the city. It was massive, its stone walls stretching high into the sky, reinforced with metaplating and glowing runes. Towers loomed overhead, archers standing vigilant, their bows at the ready. Beyond the walls, the city bustled with life, merchants peddling wares, blacksmiths hammering steel, and citizens moving about their daily routines. But there was an undercurrent of tension in the air, a feeling that war loomed just beyond the horizon. The gates creaked open, and Seraphine led them through winding streets toward the heart of the city. Ethan couldn't help but stare. The architecture was a fusion of medieval and steampunk aesthetics, with intricate clockwork mechanisms adorning buildings, powered by glowing crystals embedded in the walls. Massive pipes hissed with steam, and carriages powered by strange energy sources rolled past. It was a world caught between magic and technology, and Ethan found himself both amazed and overwhelmed. Their destination became clear as they approached a massive fortress at the city's center. The Palace of was a marvel of engineering, spires reaching toward the heavens, reinforced steel doors lined with arcane symbols, and banners fluttering in the wind. The guards at the entrance stiffened as Seraphine dismounted and signaled for Ethan to follow. He hesitated, then stepped forward, his every movement scrutinized. Inside, the halls were grand yet practical, lined with torches and glowing crystal lanterns that bathed the stone corridors in soft blue light. They passed through several chambers before finally arriving at the throne room. Ethan's heart pounded as the doors swung open, revealing a vast chamber lined with towering pillars. At the far end sat King Alden, a man in his 50s with sharp features, a neatly trimmed beard, and piercing blue eyes that missed nothing. He wore a regal coat of silver and deep blue, his posture exuding authority. Beside him stood his advisors, their expressions unreadable. Seraphine knelt before the throne. "My king, we have encountered an outsider. He appeared in the southern fields with technology unlike any we have seen before." She motioned toward Ethan, who remained standing, unsure of the protocol. The knights shifted uncomfortably at his lack of decorum, but Alden merely studied him in silence. "You are not of, nor of this world, I suspect," the king finally said, his voice even but carrying the weight of years of leadership. Ethan cleared his throat. "No, your majesty. My name is Ethan Vass. One moment, I was in my lab, and the next, I was here." He lifted his wrist, revealing the glowing interface of his console. "This thing, my war factory system, seems to be linked to me now. It's the reason your knights saw those drones earlier." A murmur spread through the court, hushed whispers of magic and forbidden knowledge. Alden steepled his fingers. "And this war factory, what is its purpose?" Ethan hesitated. The truth was, he didn't fully understand it himself. "It allows me to construct advanced weaponry, drones, defenses all from thin air. It's like a mobile war machine built into my mind." More whispers. The advisors exchanged wary glances. Alden's gaze remained unreadable. "That is a dangerous gift," he finally said. "When that could change the course of history in the wrong hands." Ethan tensed, sensing the shift in the room's atmosphere. I don't want to cause trouble. I just want to figure out how I got here and if there's a way back. Seraphine stepped forward. Your Majesty, the Empire has grown bolden in their assaults. If Ethan speaks the truth, his technology could turn the tide of battle in our favor. The mention of the sent a ripple of tension through the room. Alden exhaled slowly, his fingers tapping against the armrest of his throne. Ethan Vass, he said at last. You claim no allegiance, yet you wield the power of an army. I cannot ignore the threat or the potential. Therefore, I will offer you a choice. He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto Ethan's. You may prove your worth to aid us in defending our people, and in return, we will help you uncover the secrets of your war factory and, perhaps, a way home. Ethan swallowed hard. It wasn't a threat, not outright, but he could see the unspoken truth in the king's words. If he refused, he would never be allowed to leave this room alive. He was an unknown variable, a potential weapon that couldn't be left unchecked. The weight of the decision settled heavily on his shoulders. Fight in a war he didn't belong to or risk becoming an enemy of the kingdom that might be his only hope of survival. He clenched his fists. There wasn't really a choice at all. All right, he said, his voice steady. I'll help you. Alden nodded, satisfied. Then welcome to Ethan Vass. From this moment on, your war factory belongs to us. Ethan stood in the heart of his war factory, watching as towering mechanical arms worked to life, assembling advanced drones and weaponry at an astonishing speed. The air buzzed with energy, the rhythmic hum of machinery blending with the occasional burst of steam. Holographic blueprints hovered before him, displaying schematics for tanks, turrets, and aerial units unlike anything this world had ever seen. He could barely wrap his mind around the fact that all of this massive fortress of war, was being generated by his own mind, controlled through the interface embedded within his wrist. The factory was his to command, a technological marvel from another world, yet somehow, it had seamlessly integrated into this medieval land of swords and magic. Commandant Seraphine stood beside him, arms crossed as she watched the machines at work. She had been skeptical at first, as had most of the knights of, but now, seeing the drones hover effortlessly in formation, their sleek metallic bodies gleaming under the glow of the factory's artificial lighting, she was forced to admit that Ethan's power was real. And it was terrifying. You weren't exaggerating, she murmured, shaking her head. With this kind of production capability, you could build an army in days, perhaps even less. Ethan exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. Yeah, and that's what worries me. He turned to face her, his expression serious. This isn't just about helping defend itself anymore. If the Empire finds out what I'm capable of, they'll do anything to take this factory for themselves. And if they get their hands on it, it won't just be that falls, it'll be the entire continent. Seraphine didn't reply immediately. She didn't have to. The unspoken weight of his words settled between them like a storm cloud. The Empire was already powerful enough with its legions of brute warriors and beta mages. If they managed to seize Ethan's technology, they would become unstoppable. Then we make sure that never happens, she finally said, her voice steely with determination. Your war factory is greatest advantage. We need to strike first, before they realize what they're up against. Before Ethan could respond, the doors to the command chamber hissed open, and a group of scouts rushed inside, their faces pale with urgency. Commandant, Lord Ethan, one of them panted. Forces have been spotted less than 10 miles from the Bayorden. Their numbers are greater than expected. Siege weapons, war beasts, they're preparing for a assault. Ethan felt his stomach drop. They had been expecting an attack, but not this soon. How long until they reach? He asked, already pulling up his factory's production queue, adjusting outputs for rapid deployment. The scout hesitated. 2 days, maybe less if they push through the night. Seraphine clenched her jaw, turning to Ethan. Then we don't have time to waste. Show me what your factory can really do. Ethan's fingers danced over the interface as he initiated war production. The factory roared in response, its assembly lines shifting into overdrive. The sound of meta clashing against meta filled the chamber as drones assembled massive siege engines, their forms sleek and deadly. Artillery units rolled off the production lines, their barrels glowing with an otherworldly energy. Automated turrets were mounted onto defensive walls, scanning for incoming threats. For the next several hours, Ethan and Seraphine worked tirelessly, coordinating deployment plans and preparing forces for the inevitable confrontation. Maps were spread across the central table, marked with potential ambush points and fallback positions. Ethan's war machines would serve as the first line of defense, holding the forces at bay while knights prepared to strike. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the battlefield outside the city was already transforming. Rows of mechanized turrets lined the perimeter, their targeting systems calibrating for maximum efficiency. A fleet of combat drones hovered above, patrolling the skies with cold precision. Soldiers, though initially wary of the alien technology, now watched in awe as Ethan's machines moved into formation, ready to fight alongside them. Ethan stood on the edge of the battlements, watching the final preparations unfold. He could feel the weight of responsibility pressing against his chest. This wasn't just about proving himself anymore. This was about survival. He had been thrown into this world with no warning, no explanation, but now, the fate of an entire kingdom rested on his shoulders. And despite the fear gnawing at the edges of his mind, he knew one thing for certain: he wouldn't let fall. Seraphine joined him, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "They'll be here soon," she said quietly. "Are you ready?" Ethan tightened his grip on the railing, watching as the first glimmers of torchlight appeared in the distance, a sea of fire and steel. He could hear the faint sound of war horns echoing across the plains, the distant rumble of approaching siege engines. They were coming. And they were coming in force. He exhaled slowly, his eyes hardening with resolve. "Yeah," he said. "Let's show them what a war factory can do." The battlefield was silent in the aftermath of war, save for the occasional crackling of fire and the groans of the wounded. The plains outside were now a ruined wasteland of broken siege engines, shattered weapons, and smoldering remains of what had once been an unstoppable force. The war factory's mechanized legions had done their job. The army, so accustomed to overwhelming their enemies through sheer might and brutality, had never faced anything like this before. The automated war machines had crushed their formations, shredded their war beasts, and outmaneuvered their most seasoned generals. Victory was absolute. Ethan stood at the edge of the battlefield, his armored coat stained with smoke and dirt, exhaustion evident in his posture. His war drones hovered silently above, scanning the remains of the battlefield for any lingering threats. The war factory's turrets still hummed with power, their barrels glowing faintly, ready to fire at a moment's notice. But there was no need. They had fled. Those who hadn't been annihilated by his machines had either surrendered or retreated into the darkness. For the first time since arriving in this world, Ethan allowed himself to breathe. They had won. Seraphine approached, her silver armor dented and scratched, but her expression victorious. Behind her, the knights of stood in awe, their swords lowered, their eyes flickering between Ethan and the monstrous machines that had fought beside them. "It's over," she said, stopping beside him. "They never expected this. They'll think twice before ever setting foot near again." Ethan let out a slow breath, nodding. "It's over for now," he corrected. "But this isn't the last time they'll come. They'll go back, regroup, figure out what went wrong. And next time, they'll come prepared." He turned, glancing at the rows of drones that stood idle now that the battle was done. "And we need to be ready for that." A murmur spread among the soldiers. Their cheers had turned into murmured discussions. There was no denying that Ethan's machines had saved them, but some of them looked uneasy. He could see it in their faces, the fear, the uncertainty. They had fought side by side with something they didn't understand. Machines that never tired, never hesitated, never faltered. To them, Ethan's war factory was both a miracle and a potential disaster waiting to happen. One of the olden knights, a grizzled warrior named Azric, stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "You wield power unlike anything this world has ever seen," he said, was heavy with both respect and wariness. "You turned the tide of battle with nothing more than matter and fire. But what happens when there's no war left to fight?" Ethan met his gaze, understanding the unspoken question. What happens when a force like this has no enemy left? What happens when the war factory, built for battle, is no longer needed? He had asked himself the same question countless times. Seraphine stepped in before he could respond, her voice unwavering. "Ethan has given us a fighting chance. Without him, would have fallen. We owe him our lives." She turned back to Ethan, nodding firmly. "And if we are to survive in this world, we must embrace the future, not fear it." Ethan appreciated her support, but he knew this wasn't just about one battle. He had changed the balance of power in this world forever. Was no longer just a small kingdom fending off an empire. It had become something more. Something dangerous. And that meant new challenges, new enemies, and decisions he wasn't sure he was ready to make. He took a deep breath and turned to the assembled knights, the soldiers, the people who had fought so bravely. "I built the war factory to protect," he said, his voice carrying across the field. "Not to conquer, not to destroy. I know what you're thinking. This kind of power, it changes everything. But I won't let it turn into something we fear. If we use this technology wisely, we can end this cycle of war. We can make sure that no kingdom, no empire, no tyrant can ever crush us again." Silence followed his words, but then, slowly, the knights nodded. Their weariness hadn't disappeared, but neither had their gratitude. Seraphine placed a hand on his shoulder, a small but significant gesture of trust. "Then let's make sure we're ready for whatever comes next." Ethan exhaled, turning back toward the war factory in the distance. Even from here, he could see its towering metal walls, the flickering lights of its machines, the hum of its automated systems. He wasn't just a warrior in this world. He was a force of progress, of change. Whether that change would be for the better or worse, only time would tell. For now, he would keep building, keep preparing. Because he knew one thing for sure. The war wasn't over. It had only just begun.